But before I jump into the presentation, just a quick word on Idaho. So we've been in Idaho now just coming up on 4 years, and I have to say, it was evident to us as a new sort of entrant into Idaho, the welcoming nature of the state, and it was Governor Butch Otter, who we just talked to, and a board member of ours, welcoming us with open arms, taking us on the road to Bay Street and Wall Street to extol the virtues of exploring in Idaho as a destination for junior miners. And we've certainly experienced it after that as well, in terms of a really open state government, whether it was the lawmakers or the various bureaus that we deal with, and we will be dealing with on a go-forward basis, permitting. The door has always been open to us, and it's been great. I have to say, I've worked in over 30 countries around the world, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And Idaho is, in my mind, sort of top destination in terms of my experience in openness. So now on to Integra. Lots to talk about today. We put out a news release talking about some high grades. So we'll touch a bit about exploration, our development plans for the DeLamar project going forward. But maybe just a little bit about our history here. And Tina touched on it earlier. It really sort of, if you want to understand the playbook of Integra, you need to look no further than the playbook which we had at Integra Gold, which was a company that we were all part of as recently as about 4 years ago when we sold the project. But essentially, this is a project that we started with at Integra Gold, very similar to what we have at DeLamar. Brownfield's exploration project was in production under the banner of a major mining company, was shut down due to low gold and silver prices, not due to depleted resources and reserves. And it's a project that we decided to reinitiate production on. So while we were marching forward towards production, we were underground, intent on building that deposit. Eldorado came in and bought us out for $600 million, and the rest was history. Now, the important part here is we kept the band together and refocused our attention, this time on Idaho and the DeLamar project, which we acquired from Kinross a couple of years ago, which is the focus of our attention these days. So just a quick note on our capital structure: 54.7 million shares outstanding in the company, about $25 million US in the treasury, so more than enough to fulfill our exploration plans, more than enough to fulfill our next big step, which is our pre-feasibility study. And on the right-hand side, as you can see, the universe of coverage that we have, both in the US and Canada. And the US coverage from a research perspective is really important to us. And it's important to us because as of July last year, we became a dual-listed company, not only trading on the Toronto Stock Exchange, but now trading on the New York Stock Exchange. And that's done a lot for the company, and it's given us a whole new audience to participate in our stock. And so we're pretty happy about that. So I talk about scarcity a lot in the guise of presentations that I do. Again, I've been in the business for 30 years. We've seen a lot of projects around the world. And this notion of scarcity, really creeps into every discussion that we have with any investor, as a matter of fact. And this National Bank slide really nails it for us. So basically, National Bank did a study of all the gold and silver resources that have been declared around the world, and it turns out there's about 3,500 of them. So it's a relatively big number, but that's the entire planet, the entire Earth's crust. Now, an interesting thing happens when you start to apply different metrics, filtering metrics to the total number of 3,500 gold silver assets. Remove all the projects that have less than a 10-year mine life, remove all the projects that don't have a viable economic study, remove all the projects that are not in what we would call in the industry a tier 1 jurisdiction, Australia, Canada, the US being tier 1. And then finally, that kiss of death, remove all the projects that are going to cost $500 million or more to build. And really what that leaves you with is 4 assets now. One was taken away from us. And this is what we believe is kind of the coming storm to the industry. Yes, we're intent on building this asset, but there's an M&A factor that is going to creep into this industry now. In fact, I believe that we're in the early stages of that. And we are positioned with an asset that could potentially fulfill that. You recognize the character on this slide, on the horse. That's Butch there at his ranch. In terms of what 2021 is going to look like for us, from an exploration perspective, lots of exploration to be done. 10,000 meters is now the minimum. We're going to be doing a lot more than that going forward. As of this morning, as a matter of fact, we announced that we're going from 2 drill rigs to 4 drill rigs, really trying to hit this area a lot harder than we have been in an effort to flesh out more resource potential in the area. And while we're doing all that, we're advancing the project towards pre-feasibility, and that's the next big step for us. That's going to happen in Q4 of this year, and that is really the kickoff for us in terms of permitting and moving things forward. We've got an extensive ESG program on the go as we speak. Happy to go into any details on that in the Q&A a bit later, but it's really important, and we're starting from scratch on that level. So just to give you a bit of guidance on what to expect in the upcoming PFS study, really the starting point for us was the PEA study, the preliminary economic assessment, which we did a couple years back. And for us, the important part of that study was we wanted to show our investors not necessarily the absolutely largest project that could be built out there, but what kind of project could we afford to finance ourselves and build ourselves. And so for $160 million US of pre-production capital, it got us to a production level of 124,000 ounces of gold equivalent per year, and an NPV at the time using a gold price and a silver price input of $1,350 and $1,690 respectively. So a really good result of an NPV 5 of $358 million, really quick payback, 43% IRR. So really robust project, not going to cost a lot of money to build. Essentially starting off from where Kinross left off in 2000 when they shut down the project. Now, if you start to plug in more current gold and silver prices, these numbers here, you start to get a really big number in terms of value, $675 million NPV 5, 74% IRR, which is really great. And a lot of this is being driven by the low cost of production that we're forecasting from a combination of heap leaching and milling of gold and silver. What we are guiding our shareholders on is a production level that looks well north of 124,000 ounces a year in the upcoming pre-feasibility study. In fact, maybe 150 to 200,000 ounces a year in that range is what we're expecting for the upcoming PFS. So stay tuned for that. That's going to occur in the fourth quarter of this year. Now, jumping to the next slide, just to kind of give you a bit of an overview. So state capital of Boise is up here. For us to drive to the project, it's a fairly easy hour and 45-minute drive along the interstate, and then a secondary road into the project area itself. There's DeLamar, that's 3.3 million ounces of gold equivalent. Florida Mountain, which is 1.1 million ounces of gold equivalent. And those are the two sort of declared resource areas that we have for now. And then the additional areas that we have, War Eagle, an area that's been generating a lot of attention due to its very, very high grades in the last couple of years. And really happy to talk about today as well, this new area called Black Sheep, which is basically a look-alike from a geological perspective to what we see down at DeLamar. So more on that a bit later on in the presentation. Moving on to Florida Mountain, just as a starting point, because Florida Mountain is really where our development plans show us starting production. It's a great deposit. This is a drone view looking from the west to the east. And the top of the resource, the 1.1 million ounces, is the top of this high wall of the open pit. As you can see, these open pits have been partially backfilled by Kinross, who produce a lot of gold and silver out of here over about a 10-year period. The bottom of our resource, 1.1 million ounces, is right below that haulage road. So, everything in terms of our future mining plans that we've declared so far is between these two lines. Now, a pretty interesting thing occurred basically about 2.5 years ago when we started doing some confirmatory drilling up here in an effort to firm up the resource and collect sample material for metallurgy. And so we were drilling happily up there, and lo and behold, we started to hit some really spectacular high grades in a number of locations, leading us to start essentially connecting the dots, which is what we do in our business, geologists especially. And in an effort to connect these dots, we started to come up with a view of, wow, there's some really high grades here that we're intersecting right to the top of the mountain, in and amongst the low grade. And so we started to drill outside of the resource boundary, essentially down below here, and we started to hit some spectacular grades of gold and silver, which I'll show you in a digital means in a sec, but essentially, grades of 10, 15, 20 grams per ton gold, thousands of grams per ton silver. And we're starting to connect the dots and getting a sense of, wow, there's something here that's outside of the resource envelope. And you have to look no further than to the history of this district, because when you rotate around, I'll point out a number of these, what we call mine dumps. Well, these mine dumps are basically piles of rock that the old timers created when they were excavating adits or tunnels into the side of the mountain in that direction. And you look back at the historical records from Florida Mountain, you see evidence of 15 gram per ton minimum grades, cutoffs, as we call it in our business, 30 grams per ton, 60 grams per ton average grades in these high grade veins that were mined below the mountain. And there's some amazing history, gunfights. It was really the Wild West out there from a historical perspective. But really what I'm trying to say here is there's a connection between what we've been drilling at the top of the mountain and these spectacular high grades below. And so over the course of time, and just getting into the digital model here, we started to drill beneath this resource. So this is the resource, the red, the green, and the blue is the 1.1 million ounce resource. This is the pit constrained resource using $1,300 gold, 1690 silver. And you can see sort of our first drilling in 2019 proved really successful. You can see some of these grades for yourself. There's a 40.39 grams per ton gold there. Really, really spectacular gold and silver grades. So this was our first iteration of drilling outside of the resource model. And then knowing kind of the secret sauce to what was going on, we started to step out and downwards below the deposit. And again, coming up with a lot of success. Our hit rate now is about 70%. And you can see again, a proliferation of really high grade gold and silver below the resource into the mountain in the direction of where the old timers used to mine. And so what we're getting a sense of now is there's potentially, subject to more drilling and studies, a high grade resource that sits under the mountain there. And subject to future exploration, if we can bring those ounces into a resource and B, a mine plan, those could add some serious value to the economic premise that I showed you earlier, whereby we were just simply mining open pit resources at the top of the mountain here. So potentially a game changer, lots to be done there. We've got one drill rig there. We're looking at adding, or we will be adding in the next couple of weeks here, a second drill rig to the effort. Now, one of the things that we use, tools that we use in our business to basically define size, if you will, the footprint, the signature of these deposits, really interesting. And this is something that no other previous operator had really ever done, which was soil geochemistry. That's basically you're grabbing a sample of soil and analyzing it for gold and silver, something that had never been done before in most parts of the DeLamar area. So this is the 1.1 million ounce deposit that you see there. And these purple colors, especially the darker purple colors, are really interesting to us because what's going on there is that's showing a lot of potential to expand this deposit outside of the footprint of Florida Mountain, as you see right there. And so our plan is to initiate drilling in these areas outside of the resource area up here and down there. And so that dark purple is really, really an important target for us. And then on to geophysics. We did the same thing with from a geophysical perspective. Something called IP chargeability, induced polarization chargeability, really tends to light up the signatures of these deposits. And you can see here our first line of IP over top of Florida Mountain, which is right there, gave us these signatures, which is kind of what we expected. What we didn't expect was this large anomaly that's set right there to the west of Florida Mountain. And so we ran some more lines of geophysics over the top of that. And lo and behold, we got a really, really big chargeability signature. What you're looking at here are all the lines of geophysics that we ran over the top of Florida Mountain, several times larger than the footprint of Florida Mountain itself. So what our exploration team believes, subject again to more exploration, more drilling to be done, is that this is the root of the Florida Mountain, and this is the tip of the iceberg, the top of the mountain. And these are somehow connected. More to be done on that this coming summer. And then jumping to this other area of potential, which we really recently just fleshed out, brand new area, an area that has a lot of past workings, not much in the way of prior sort of modern exploration, which is called Black Sheep. So thus far, we've talked about Florida Mountain. There's DeLamar itself, that's 3.3 million ounces. Now we're jumping into this area called Black Sheep, and specifically two areas in particular. One's called Georgiana and one's called Lucky Days. Now, I won't get into a lot of sort of technical detail on why we believe that this is an analog to DeLamar itself, but it's got all the same ingredients that made DeLamar and Florida Mountain are up in this area. It's got all the same geological signatures, geophysical signatures, etc. So we put our first couple of drill holes into this area earlier last year, and we started to get a lot of core that looked like that in our first holes in areas that had never been drilled before. And you can imagine the excitement that we all had when we started to see these results coming through. In our first holes in the middle of nowhere, you start to see core that looks like that. You can really make a strong case for the fact that there's more of the same to be done. And this core looks exactly as any hole that's been drilled right through the guts of DeLamar itself. So that was quite interesting. And in fact, we came up with some really spectacular drill results on our first pass of drilling into that area. As you can see there, for our first pass, some grades of gold and silver, bulk tonnage, potentially subject more to further drilling to be done to the north and south, but this is an area that's going to grow. And if you look at this area, in addition to what we announced this morning at Lucky Days, you start to get the sense that there's something to this in terms of size and scale. And again, jumping back to IP chargeability, this is the chargeability that's associated with DeLamar. That red plume that you see there, that's 3.3 million ounces of gold equivalent. And so that's the IP chargeability for DeLamar. And check out, when I zoom in to this area, what Lucky Days, Georgiana looks like on the southern end of the Black Sheep trend. There is a large IP chargeability signature that's related to that, several times larger than what you'd see down at DeLamar itself. But again, so it gives you the impression that we're just scratching the edge of the surface on something that's potentially really big out here. And so just sort of jumping back to what else we need to drill out there. Well, there's lots of other potential, obviously, in addition to all of these other areas that we've talked about where we need to do a lot more drilling. We really haven't gotten to the best geochem targets up in the Black Sheep area. Spain and Statute Hills is there, Twin Peaks is there, and those are really the bigger anomalies of anything that we've got out there yet to be tested. So we'll be testing those going forward this coming summer. Jumping now to War Eagle. Again, we've talked about DeLamar itself. We've talked about Florida. The Black Sheep area is here. Now we're going to jump to this War Eagle district, which is really a fascinating district from a historical perspective. Some of the highest grades of gold and silver ever recorded in the state of Idaho have come out of two veins in this district. One's called the Poor Man, the other one's called the Orofino. And again, gun battles galore, dating back in history, back in time where miners were actually shooting it out underground for this high-grade gold and silver. So jumping to our drilling, and this is a view of some of the drilling that we've done over just a small portion of War Eagle. Lots more to be drilled here. But as you can see here, as I zoom in to some of these grades, there are some spectacular intervals here, 34 meters going 10.8 grams gold, 115 grams silver. You can read the rest for yourself, but you get the sense that we're on to something here. And this is a system that looks a lot like Florida Mountain itself. Plunging chutes of high grade is what we're seeing here. There's probably a third one that's developing here. and completely open on strike to the north and south and at depth here. So lots to be done. We'll be hitting War Eagle with a couple thousand meters of drilling this coming summer, but this is an area that again could be another game changer from a grade perspective. So what to expect over the coming year? We talked about 10,000 meter. It's going to be a bigger program than that, obviously, having just added 2 drill rigs to the existing 2 now, but lots to be done on the exploration path. And while we're doing that, de-risking the project with the pre-feasibility study. So the permitting initiatives or the permitting discussions have started already with the Bureau of Land Management in Marsing. There's a full-time BLM person who's now on the case working on our behalf in Marsing, in Idaho. And while we're doing that work, we're collecting all the baseline data, the water, the air quality data, et cetera, that's going to feed into future permitting iterations. And while we're doing all that, we're finishing up all the geotechnical work, the metallurgical work designed to firm up the PFS, which is on track for this coming fall. And not to belabor this point, I think Butch and Ben addressed it really succinctly, but Idaho from a permitting perspective, in terms of its openness to mining activity, we found it to be excellent. As Ben mentioned, Fraser Institute ranked Idaho #1 in the Policy Perception Index, #1 worldwide amongst 100 jurisdictions. That's amazing. And jumping to the kind of the permitting timeline here, with respect to what's going on now, we're obviously in 2021, pre-feasibility study beginning of the fourth quarter of this year. While we're doing all that, we're doing lots of really exciting drilling in an effort to build on the 4.4 million ounce gold equivalent resource. And while all that is happening, feeding lots of data into what is going to be the plan of operations middle next year, moving into completeness review, EIS, and then a record decision. And none of this could be possible if it wasn't for this great group of individuals that I have the pleasure of worked with them for over 8 years, starting at Integra Gold, now at Integra Resources, same team that brought you Integra Gold, and this great board of directors, including Butch, who's on this call, would be nowhere without them. So on that note, happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thanks, George. That was a great presentation, and you've got some fantastic verify skills. So interesting to see, how much the project has grown over the last little while. Obviously, some great results out this morning and in the last several months as well. You mentioned drilling outside about 400 meters outside of the resource at Florida Mountain. You're hitting these high-grade results as well. Can you give us a sense in terms of the resource, what will actually be included in that update?
So in terms of the resource that's going into the resource update, which will then feed the PFS study, obviously because it's PFS, the focus will be on M&I resources because those are the only resources that you can in fact use in PFS. What's going to go into it is some of the additional drilling that we've done along the periphery of specifically Florida Mountain. These high grade hits that we have here, because they're so spread out, connectable yet spread out, lots more drilling to be done there. So none of that high grade is going to make it into the resource update per se. But what we are thinking about now is, because our hit rate of high grade below Florida Mountain has achieved a 70% rate, which from an exploration perspective is excellent. We're starting to think about what it would take to get those intercepts into a resource estimate in the future, because that could be a real game changer. Max's view is that we've got easily 1 million ounces of high grade sitting below Florida Mountain. And so we're thinking about what it would take to bring that into a resource estimate, maybe an underground exploration program sometime in the future. But that could add tremendous value. Something like that could add tremendous value to a project that's already really, really economic and viable.
Yeah, and it seems like there's some upside with a lot of the results at Black Sheep and some of the, Twin Peaks anomalies. When you plan to start drilling kind of at Twin Peaks, Statue Hills in the future?
Yeah, there's kind of a sequence, Tina, to how we kind of carry this out, and other companies do the same. It's kind of geology 101, which is, you start by doing the target generation work, which is the soil geochem. You lead to then geophysics, which is something we haven't done up in that area. We haven't done IP specifically. I'm quite sure that these areas are going to light up really strongly in the IP, but that's work that we need to do. We've got some field mapping to do. I hope to be getting into the areas like this by the end of the year, but we've got so much to focus on, specifically in Georgiana and Lucky Days for now. Let's work up these targets first. Again, fingers crossed, by the end of the year, we'll be up in those areas.
Well, I think you talked about the IP chargeability already, but it seems, and I like to talk about predictability of assets as far as you can for an exploration company, but it seems like there's quite a bit of predictability in terms of discovery on these deposits.
Yeah, and Tina, it's taken some time to get there, in terms of unraveling what makes these deposits what they are. When we first acquired these assets from Kinross a couple of years back, the description of Florida Mountain versus War Eagle versus, say, DeLamar was these were all disparate, disconnected deposits. And what we found is all they are is variations of the same theme. This is a really big district, as it turns out. These aren't disconnected deposits. They're all related to the same theme. And there's certain things like the IP chargeability, which work extremely well at lighting them up. Soil geochem, same. So, we'll refine that as we go forward. But I feel like we're hitting critical mass here on target generation and discovery.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it seems like you've had a lot of great press releases out. So it'll be interesting to see how things develop from the PEA. It seems like you're optimizing significantly for the PFS.
We are indeed. Yeah, lots on the go. There's lots going on in the background. We talk a lot about exploration results, but there's a whole other branch of our company, the engineers who are doing a lot of geotechnical work, plant and mine design work, a metallurgical test work that's ongoing that'll feed into the study. We'll talk more about that probably in the second half of this year as we get closer to PFS.
And there's some differences between grades depending on where you're looking on the property. Are you seeing similar gold-silver ratios?
Actually, these deposits do have variations in gold-silver ratios. DeLamar, for example, this deposit down here, which was mined, in various phases, open pit by Kinross, obviously, because there was a big backfilled open pit there. That over time, if you look back in time, there are phases when the DeLamar deposit was the DeLamar silver and gold mine, and then when gold was in favor, it became the DeLamar gold and silver mine. But the silver ratios are higher at DeLamar relative to Florida. Florida is more a gold-rich system relative to silver.
Okay. And we talked about permitting in the keynote as well, but what are your thoughts on permitting? Is there any way to reduce the timeline?
I'd like to say that we can, having gotten a little bit of a head start on engaging with the BLM. And, I think that all kicked off when we signed the BLM on with a memorandum of understanding where they would actually second a full-time BLM person to our file to work on the file. Typically, that doesn't happen until after PFS, but the fact that we started engaging with them, a year and a half before that would say to me that there's some, how should I say, excitement on for the permitting authorities' part to get moving on this file, and hopefully we can cut that timeline down. I would say one of the things going from for us in the grand scheme, a couple things. Obviously, we don't have the national forests, the big water courses, near us. Not to say that we don't need to pay attention to water. Water usage is going to be a big issue out here, and a big question mark, and something we have to deal with going forward. But the fact that this area is been disturbed, and it was disturbed and reclaimed really recently. In fact, that this was in production up until the year 2000. That's pretty recent from a historical perspective. Would say to me that our permitting should be fairly straightforward. And we're getting started on it now.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for the presentation. I know if investors are curious, you guys have a fantastic YouTube channel as well. So there's a lot of good content on there if anyone's interested in checking it out. But thanks for the presentation.
Thanks, Tina.